One of the big questions might be in relation to suffering. One could ask, why would a good God allow us to suffer so much in this world?
Yes, given that we believe in a good and all-powerful God, could he not just stop suffering? It's an important question. I think particularly today, it seems to be a reason, and a very understandable reason, that is quite prominent and popular for people not believing in God. It seems that in this project of God, in which he's created a being who's directly in his image, in a spiritual soul, but in perfect harmony with a human body, although it's been wounded by sin, that harmony, it seems that we affect each other when we choose to go against God. And Adam and Eve were the first person to do that, and when they went against God, they caused quite a bit of pollution within the physical, but also within the human community. We call it original sin, and that wounding has been handed down over the ages. We wound each other across time, but particularly in the present. I can just punch you in the stomach, and it does hurt. You feel that physically. It's part of the way our bodies are made, that we get these warning signs of pain. And it seems that God has allowed that when he created a species that was physical and spiritual. Perhaps he had to allow for the possibility of pain. He certainly had to allow for the possibility of choosing against him, because we're created for love. This physical universe is a stage for the human person to decide for or against God, to say yes to his grace or to say no to it. And whenever we say no, we wound each other, we hurt each other. More obviously when you punch someone or in other bad acts. So it is a problem. It's not what God directly wanted. He wanted us to use our freedom to be good, but he couldn't force us to do that, because then it wouldn't be love. It wouldn't be true self-giving. It wouldn't create true communion. And we know from the biblical revelation that his ultimate desire for us is to share his actual life. And that has to be on the basis of a free giving, a free yes to his plan. Given that he can't stop it, what can he do? Well, the one thing he can do is to be with us in it. To say, look, I still love you. To create an experience of being loved by God even when we're suffering. And that experience is open to us because God does love us, and he's enabled us to tune into that through our souls. And by becoming man, by becoming a human being in Jesus Christ, he's now intimately connected with us, and through the church and the sacraments he's touching us and teaching us. And therefore, if we can discover through others being with us as well that he, the ultimate creator, the ultimate lover, through the cross, through his own suffering, is with us in that suffering, it can be turned around. Even if we don't fully discover it, it's being turned around. The extent to which we're open to him, he's already beginning to make suffering, amazingly, something that stops the cycle of evil, that stops the cycle of suffering. Because whenever we love, particularly in suffering, we're doing a very powerful act, and we are stopping the cycle of bitterness and anger which caused it. So strangely, suffering is both the result of sin, but also its antidote when it's linked with Jesus' sufferings on the cross. So the Christian answer to the problem of suffering is that God can't stop it in this particular plan of the human species, but he can be with us in it, turning it around and making it fruitful and drawing out an even deeper love. So he can't stop it. It is a tragedy. It is a result of evil. It's not what he wanted. But in the end, it will prove not to have been good. Suffering will never prove to have been good, but to have been proved to be worthwhile because through it we can come, seems like, almost to a deeper communion with God. And certainly his original plan now, through him, in the church, can still come to completion. He couldn't stop the possibility, but he could make sure that it will not have evil, and sin and suffering will not have the final answer, the final word.
So what you're saying is that the suffering that we experience, that's deep psychological suffering, that has a deeper meaning for us as Christians. And and there's a connection between that and our state of original sin. Is that somehow why we experience deeper effects of suffering? Is there a connection there?
Yeah, I think the deeper suffering of awful pain, or worse suffering, is awful loneliness and feeling unimportant and worthless. That is related to the original sin of Adam and Eve, and to the wounding that we've received from that, but also, of course, to our own sin and to other people's sin particularly. We remember the results of sin affects the innocent more than the guilty. So, yeah, it's all linked to the free human soul going against God.
So some people will speak about suffering. When we think about suffering and love, true love, you might think that in some sense they are two sides of the same coin. Can you have true love without true suffering in this world?
Yeah, I think you can. There is an element of suffering which can, it seems, deepen love. It draws us out and makes us even more self-giving. And I suppose suffering can provide a contrast to the joy and peace of true communion as well. But there's also a sense in which it's not needed suffering. Serious suffering, I do believe, is a result of sin in the world, and sin is definitely not needed. There are dimensions of Eastern thought which say somehow evil and good are both necessary for the progress of history, but that's definitely not the belief of Christianity. You know, sometimes in Eastern thought you get the idea of karma, you know, what goes around comes around, and somehow evil is part of, intrinsic to the way the universe is made. That's not the Christian view, which is that God made things and he saw that it was good. And order and goodness and beauty is fundamental, directly willed by God. Whereas evil and disorder and serious suffering comes from the introduction of sin into the world by the creature, not by God. God obviously permits us to be free, but he doesn't will it. And that's quite an important distinction, to say that evil is not necessary to the world. It's actually a tragedy and should be avoided, even though, because God has been faithful even to the point of dying on a cross, he has indeed shown in a strange way an even more ultimate self-giving for us, and we can now imitate that. So true love doesn't need deep suffering, but the deep suffering can certainly be fed into the love, turned around by the love, and maybe even making the love even more self-giving.